Hello everyone, and welcome back to your channel name. Before we dive into today's story, if you enjoy thrilling and suspenseful narratives, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our weekly content. Your support means the world to us and allows us to continue bringing you these compelling stories. Now, get comfortable and let's begin. The friendship between Liam and Ethan was forged in the fiery heart of a steel mill, a bond tempered by shared sweat, long hours, and the ever-present danger that hung in the air like a metallic haze. They had started on the same day, two young men with calloused hands and dreams that stretched far beyond the smoke-choked skies of their industrial town. Liam was the steady one, a man whose love for his wife, Clara, was the anchor of his life. Ethan was the charmer, a man with a quick smile and a restless energy that drew people in. Clara had liked Ethan at first. He was a frequent guest in their small but cozy home, his laughter echoing off the walls during their weekend barbecues. He and Liam would spend hours in the garage, tinkering with Liam's vintage motorcycle, their easy camaraderie a comforting backdrop to Clara's domestic life. She and Liam had been married for 5 years, and their love was a quiet, deeply rooted thing. Liam's presence was her safe harbor, his steady, reassuring nature a balm to her soul. The first tremor of unease came on a sweltering summer evening. The three of them were sitting on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. Liam was recounting a story from work, his voice a low, rumbling bass. Clara was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder, when she happened to glance at Ethan. He was looking at her, his gaze intense and unsettling. It wasn't the friendly, familiar look she was used to. There was something else there, something predatory that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She quickly looked away, her heart giving a little flutter of apprehension. She told herself she was imagining things, that it was just a trick of the fading light. But the incidents kept happening. A touch that lingered a moment too long when he handed her a drink. A compliment about her appearance that felt just a little too personal. His eyes raking over her in a way that made her feel exposed. He would sometimes show up at the house when Liam was working a late shift, using the excuse of dropping something off. Clara started making sure she was busy, or she would pretend not to hear the doorbell. She tried to talk to Liam about it once, her words hesitant and uncertain. "Don't you think Ethan's been acting a little strange lately?" Liam had looked up from the newspaper he was reading, a frown creasing his brow. "Strange how? I don't know," she'd faltered. "The way he looks at me sometimes. It just makes me uncomfortable." Liam had chuckled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Honey, that's just Ethan. He's a bit of a flirt, but he's harmless. He's my best friend. He would never do anything to disrespect you." Clara had let it drop, not wanting to seem like she was causing trouble. She loved her husband, and she trusted his judgment. But the seed of fear had been planted, and it was beginning to take root. The news that Liam would have to go away for a 2-week training course for a new position at the mill filled Clara with a sense of dread. The promotion was a wonderful opportunity, something they had both been hoping for, but the thought of being alone in the house for that long made her anxious. "I'll be fine," she told Liam, forcing a smile. "It's only 2 weeks. I know, but I'm still going to worry about you," he'd said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I've asked Ethan to keep an eye on the place, just to make sure everything's okay." Clara's heart had sunk. "You did what?" "He'll just drive by a few times, make sure the doors are locked," he offered, and I thought it was a good idea. Clara didn't want Ethan anywhere near the house while she was alone, but she couldn't tell Liam that without sounding paranoid. So she'd simply nodded, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. The day Liam left was gray and overcast, mirroring Clara's mood. They'd said their goodbyes at the train station, a long, lingering kiss that tasted of love and unspoken fears. As she drove home, the rain began to fall, fat, heavy drops that splattered against the windshield like tears. The first few days of Liam's absence were quiet and uneventful. Clara threw herself into her work as a freelance graphic designer, the familiar rhythm of her routine a welcome distraction. She spoke to Liam every night, his voice a comforting presence that helped to keep her fears at bay. On the third night, she was working late in her home office when she heard a car pull into the driveway. Her heart leaped into her throat. She crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. It was Ethan's truck. She froze, her mind racing. What was he doing here? It was almost 10 o'clock. She didn't want to answer the door, but she knew he would know she was home. The lights were on. The doorbell rang, the sound jarring in the silence of the house. She took a deep breath and walked to the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. "Ethan," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What are you doing here so late?" "Hey, Clara," he said, a wide grin spreading across his face. "I was just in the neighborhood and saw your lights on. Thought I'd check in, see how you're doing." He was holding a six-pack of beer, and his eyes had a glassy sheen that told her he'd already been drinking. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just working. Working too hard," he said, stepping past her into the house. "You need to take a break. Let's have a beer." Clara wanted to tell him to leave, but the words stuck in her throat. He was Liam's best friend, and she didn't want to cause a scene. "I really can't," she said. "I have a deadline." "Come on, just one," he insisted, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "For old time's sake." Reluctantly, she agreed. She sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa as he opened two bottles, the hiss of the caps echoing the sound of her own frayed nerves. He settled himself on the opposite end of the couch, his presence filling the small living room and making it feel claustrophobic. He started talking about work, about Liam, about anything and everything. Clara just nodded and gave non-committal answers, taking small, infrequent sips of her beer. She was acutely aware of how close he was, of the way his eyes kept lingering on her. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register, "Liam is a lucky guy. A very lucky guy." Clara's stomach churned. "I'm the lucky one," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He moved closer, and the scent of stale beer and something else, something musky and unpleasant, filled her nostrils. "He doesn't appreciate you, you know," he said, his hand coming to rest on her knee. "Not like I would." Clara flinched, pulling her leg away. "Ethan, I think you should go." His smile vanished, replaced by a dark, angry expression. "Don't be like that, Clara. We're just having a friendly drink." "I'm tired," she said, standing up. "I'm going to bed." He stood up too, his movements surprisingly quick. He blocked her path, his large frame looming over her. "Not yet," he said, his voice a low growl. Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through her. She was alone in the house with this man, and she knew, with a sickening certainty, that she was in terrible danger. The world seemed to shrink, the cozy living room transforming into a cage. The friendly face of her husband's best friend had become the mask of a predator, and the silence of the house was no longer a comfort, but a terrifying void that would swallow her screams. The air in the living room grew thick and heavy, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway a hammer blow against the anvil of Clara's mounting terror. Ethan's eyes, which she had once found charmingly roguish, now held a chilling glint, a predatory hunger that made her blood run cold. His proximity was suffocating, his large frame casting a long, menacing shadow that seemed to swallow the warm, inviting light of the living room. "Ethan, please." Clara's voice was a fragile whisper, a desperate plea that seemed to be absorbed by the oppressive silence. "I'm asking you to leave." A humorless chuckle rumbled in his chest. "And I'm asking you to stay," he countered, his voice a low, menacing purr that sent a shiver of pure dread down her spine. "We're just getting to the good part." He took another step closer, and Clara instinctively retreated, her back hitting the cold, unyielding wall. She was trapped, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird beating its wings against the cage of her chest. Her mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of fear and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. This was Ethan, Liam's best friend, a man who had shared meals at their table, a man she had known for years. "Liam trusts you," she said, her voice trembling as she tried to appeal to the man she thought she knew. The friend, not the monster that stood before her. "Liam's not here," he retorted, his voice laced with a cruel, mocking tone. The words hung in the air between them, a stark and terrifying reminder of her isolation. He reached out, his hand closing around her upper arm in a grip of iron. A jolt of raw, primal fear shot through her. The pretense of civility was gone, shattered into a million pieces. This was real. This was happening. "Let go of me," she cried, her voice rising in a crescendo of panic. She struggled against his grip, but he was too strong, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. His other hand came up, a calloused palm clamping over her mouth, stifling her scream. Her muffled cries for help were lost, swallowed by the very walls that were supposed to be her sanctuary. He was dragging her now, away from the front door, away from any hope of escape. Her feet scrabbled for purchase on the polished hardwood floors, her heels squeaking in a desperate, futile protest. He forced her down the hallway, his movements rough and brutal. The familiar, comforting scent of her own home was now tainted with the acrid smell of his sweat and the stale odor of beer. He kicked open the bedroom door, the sound of the wood hitting the wall a violent crack in the suffocating silence. The room was dark, the only light filtering in from the hallway. It was their bedroom, their sanctuary, the place where she and Liam had shared their most intimate moments. The sight of their bed, the rumpled sheets a testament to her lonely nights, sent a fresh wave of revulsion and terror through her. He threw her onto the bed, the force of the impact knocking the wind out of her. She landed on the soft mattress with a sickening thud, the springs groaning in protest. Before she could recover, he was on top of her, his heavy body pinning her down, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. She fought back with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She kicked and clawed, her nails raking at his face, drawing blood. She twisted and writhed, trying to dislodge him, but he was a dead weight, an immovable force of malevolent intent. His hand was still clamped over her mouth, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. He was grunting, his breath hot and foul against her cheek. She could feel his belt buckle pressing into her stomach, a cold, hard reminder of his intentions. The world narrowed to a terrifying, claustrophobic tunnel of sensation. The feel of his rough hands on her skin, the stench of his breath, the pain of his grip, the sound of her own frantic, muffled sobs. He was tearing at her clothes, the sound of ripping fabric a violent symphony of her violation. In that moment, something inside her snapped. The fear, the terror, it was still there, a cold, hard knot in the pit of her stomach. But something else rose to meet it, a white-hot, incandescent rage. She would not be a victim. She would not be broken. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, she bucked her hips, throwing him off balance for a split second. It was all she needed. She brought her knee up with all her might, connecting with his groin. He roared in pain, a guttural, animalistic sound, and his hand flew from her mouth to his injured area. She scrambled away from him, off the bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floor. She didn't hesitate, didn't look back. She ran. She burst out of the bedroom, her only thought to get to the front door, to the outside world, to safety. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps heavy and uneven. He was cursing, his voice a venomous stream of obscenities. She fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers clumsy and shaking. She could hear him getting closer, his ragged breathing a terrifying sound in the silent house. The lock clicked open, and she wrenched the door open, a sob of relief escaping her lips. She stumbled out into the night, the cool, damp air a shocking contrast to the suffocating heat of the house. The rain had stopped, but the ground was wet and slick. She didn't care. She ran, her bare feet slipping on the wet pavement. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away. She could hear the front door slam open behind her, and then his voice, bellowing her name into the darkness. "Clara, you can't get away from me." His words spurred her on, fear lending wings to her feet. She ran down the street, the houses on either side dark and silent, their occupants oblivious to the life and death drama unfolding on their quiet suburban street. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw him, a dark, hulking figure silhouetted against the light from her open front door. He was running, too, and he was gaining on her. Panic seized her. She was not going to make it. He was going to catch her. She veered off the road, plunging into the dense woods that bordered her neighborhood. The branches of the trees whipped at her face and bare arms, their sharp fingers tearing at her skin. The ground was uneven, a treacherous landscape of roots and rocks. She stumbled and fell, her hands scraping against the rough bark of a tree as she tried to break her fall. She could hear him crashing through the undergrowth behind her, his progress slower now, but still relentless. She scrambled back to her feet, her body screaming in protest, and pushed on, deeper into the woods. The woods opened up into a small clearing, and she saw it, the river. It was a dark, churning ribbon of water, swollen by the recent rains. The current was strong, a powerful, relentless force. She had nowhere else to go. He was behind her, and the river was in front of her. She could hear him getting closer, his labored breathing a terrifying counterpoint to the rushing sound of the water. She turned to face him, her back to the river, her heart a wild, frantic drum against her ribs. He emerged from the trees, his face a mask of fury. There were long, bloody scratches on his cheeks, a testament to her desperate struggle. "You shouldn't have done that, Clara," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You're going to regret that." He lunged for her, and she sidestepped, her foot slipping on the muddy bank. She lost her balance, her arms flailing as she tried to regain her footing. And then she was falling, a long, terrifying fall into the cold, dark embrace of the river. The icy water shocked the air from her lungs, and she was submerged, the current immediately catching her, pulling her under, tumbling her over and over in its relentless grip. She fought to get to the surface, her arms and legs flailing, but the current was too strong. The world was a chaotic, swirling vortex of black water and suffocating pressure. Her lungs were burning, screaming for air. She saw a flash of his face on the riverbank, his features contorted in a triumphant sneer. And then the darkness claimed her, a final, merciful release from the terror and the pain. The last thing she knew was the cold, silent embrace of the river, a watery grave that would keep her secrets until the day it decided to give them up. Liam's world shattered with a single phone call. He was in a stuffy conference room, trying to focus on a presentation about advanced welding techniques, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, her voice a frantic, high-pitched squeak on the other end of the line. "Liam, you need to come home," she'd said, her words tumbling over each other in a rush of panic. "It's Clara. She's gone." The flight home was a blur of anxiety and a gnawing, ever-present fear. He tried to call Clara a dozen times, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He'd called the house line, but it just rang and rang, the unanswered summons a terrifying echo of the emptiness that was growing in his heart. When he arrived home, he found his quiet suburban street transformed into a chaotic tableau of flashing lights and yellow police tape. His house, his sanctuary, was now a crime scene, a place of sterile, impersonal investigation. A grim-faced detective, a man named Miller, with tired eyes and a rumpled suit, met him at the edge of the police tape. He spoke in a low, measured tone, his words carefully chosen, but they did little to soften the blow. Clara was missing. There were signs of a struggle in the house. Her car was still in the driveway, her purse and phone on the kitchen counter. Liam's mind refused to accept it. Clara was not missing. She was just somewhere else. She'd gone for a walk or to visit a friend. She would be back. She had to be back. But as the days turned into a week, and the week into two, the hope that had been a flickering candle flame in the darkness of his grief began to dwindle, its light slowly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of her absence. The police investigation was a frustratingly slow process. They questioned him, of course, their questions polite but probing. They wanted to know about his marriage, about any problems they might have been having. He told them everything, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper. He told them about their love, their dreams, their quiet, happy life. He told them about Ethan. Ethan had been a rock, a pillar of support in the initial days of Clara's disappearance. He had been there at the house when Liam arrived, his face a mask of concern and disbelief. He had helped organize search parties, had printed flyers with Clara's smiling face, had sat with Liam for hours, sharing his grief and offering what little comfort he could. But as the investigation wore on, a small, insidious seed of doubt began to sprout in Liam's mind. He remembered the conversation he'd had with Clara, her discomfort with Ethan's behavior. He had dismissed her concerns, and now, the memory of that conversation was a knife in his gut, twisting with every passing day. He mentioned it to Detective Miller, his words hesitant, feeling like a betrayal of his best friend. She said he'd been acting strange, Liam had said, his voice barely audible, that he made her uncomfortable. Miller had listened intently, his expression unreadable. He had already spoken to Ethan, of course. Ethan had a solid alibi for the night of Clara's disappearance. He'd been at a bar with friends, he'd said, and had several people who could corroborate his story. But Miller was a good detective, a man who had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him that something was not right with Ethan's story. The break in the case came from an unlikely source. A group of teenagers, fishing downriver from Liam and Clara's neighborhood, had snagged something heavy on their line. It wasn't a fish. It was a body. The news of the discovery ripped through Liam like a physical blow. He knew, with a sickening certainty that settled in the pit of his stomach like a lead weight, that it was Clara. The official identification was a mere formality, a brutal, bureaucratic confirmation of what his heart already knew. The autopsy revealed the horrifying truth of her final moments. She had been assaulted, her body a testament to the violent struggle she had endured. The cause of death was drowning. The grief that had been a dull, constant ache in Liam's chest now became a raging, all-consuming inferno. He was consumed by a desire for justice, a burning need to find the person who had done this to his wife, his gentle, loving Clara. His suspicion of Ethan, which had been a flickering ember, now burst into a raging flame. He remembered the scratches on Ethan's face in the days after Clara's disappearance. Ethan had claimed he'd gotten them in a pickup basketball game, but Liam now saw them for what they were, the marks of his wife's final, desperate struggle. He went to the police, his voice raw with a grief-fueled rage. He told them everything, every little detail that now seemed so damning in retrospect. Ethan's strange behavior, his presence at the house, the scratches, the lies. Miller had been one step ahead of him. He had been quietly re-interviewing the people Ethan had claimed as his alibi. And under the pressure of a potential murder investigation, their stories had begun to crumble. Ethan had been at the bar, yes, but he had left early, his friends had admitted. He had been drunk and belligerent, they'd said, and had left in a foul mood. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough. They brought Ethan in for questioning. Under the harsh, unforgiving lights of the interrogation room, Ethan's carefully constructed facade of the concerned friend began to crack. He denied everything, his voice a mixture of indignation and feigned disbelief. But as Miller laid out the evidence, the inconsistencies in his story, the testimony of his friends, the scratches that a forensic analysis had confirmed could have been made by a woman's fingernails, Ethan's composure began to unravel. The final piece of the puzzle came from a search of Ethan's truck. Tucked away in the glove compartment, they found a small, silver locket, one that Liam had given to Clara on their first anniversary. It was her favorite piece of jewelry, and she was never without it. Faced with the undeniable proof of his guilt, Ethan finally broke. The confession came in a torrent of self-pity and blame, a pathetic attempt to justify his heinous actions. He had been drunk, he'd said. He hadn't meant to hurt her. She had led him on, he'd claimed, a vile, desperate lie that made Liam's blood boil. The trial was a long, arduous process, a legalistic ritual that did little to assuage the gaping wound in Liam's soul. He sat in the courtroom every day, a silent, stoic witness to the proceedings, his eyes never leaving the man who had been his best friend, the man who had stolen his future. The guilty verdict was a hollow victory. It would not bring Clara back. It would not erase the memory of her final, terrifying moments. But it was something. It was a measure of justice, a final, definitive statement that her life had mattered, that her loss was a tragedy that would not go unpunished. In the years that followed, Liam sold the house, the place that had once been a symbol of their love, now a monument to his loss. He moved away from the town, from the steel mill, from the memories that haunted him at every turn. He carried Clara with him, a constant presence in his heart. He would often find himself talking to her, his voice a low, private murmur in the silence of his new life. He would tell her about his day, about the things that made him smile, about the enduring, unwavering love that was the only thing that had survived the fire of his grief. The river that had taken her from him became a place of pilgrimage, a place of quiet contemplation. He would go there sometimes, on the anniversary of her death, and stand on the bank, watching the water flow, a constant, relentless current that, like time itself, moved ever onward, carrying its secrets in its silent, unknowable depths. He would never truly find peace, he knew that. But in the quiet moments by the river, he would sometimes feel a sense of her presence, a gentle, reassuring warmth that was like a ghost of her hand in his. And in those moments, he would remember not the tragedy of her death, but the beauty of her life, a life that had been a gift, a treasure that he would carry with him until the day he, too, was returned to the earth, his story, like hers, finally at its end.